Boom, and welcome to another video of the Flowing Dutchman. Now, it's a special video today. I'm going to talk about the benefits, the things that you can reap when you actually swing a heavy club, also known as a Mudgar, Clubbell, Karlakattai, bulava, or a short Gada. Using a club, either as a tool or a weapon, is as old as civilization is. Do this to help make sure that shoulder is functional and actually strong in all positions. In sedentary life, we're sitting forward postures, we're rounding our upper back, our shoulders are tilted forward. You can actually do static movements in comparison to, for example, a Gada or a mace. Training with a club, or training with clubs in general, can help resolve that. That's not really what the shoulder is made for. It's the most mobile joint that we have. It's because you can go up to 20, 30 kilos. And this is very healthy for the brain. So bear with me here. I can talk about this little piece of wood here in my arms for a long time. So let's start with the history. I'm going to explain something about the tool, where it originates from, where it comes from, and after that I will move on to why you should actually use this and why it's beneficial for you. So the history, I'm going to probably step on a few feet here and there because there's traditions everywhere around the world, and there always have been traditions around the world, and some of them are very connected to this style of swinging, and some others aren't or are not anymore. If we go back all the way, using a club either as a tool or a weapon is as old as civilization is, right? We need something to hold in our hands because it actually helps us extend the arm. So if you make your arm longer or heavier, in that way you have more power. So you can actually use the natural ability of your arm in a better way. And since our thumb is very unique, which makes us unique, and also in our ability to hold something and to build stuff. And having a tool in our hands, having something that creates this leverage advantage, it's just very useful. So it's part of us as we are. It's an extension of the arm, so to speak, and the arm is very useful for us. For the heavy club part, there's a large movement in India that it's still practicing this today. Now, one of those traditions is Karlakattai. They have different forms of clubs, but it's usually a single club that they're swinging. And I've been there, and it's really about using the strength of the shoulder and about slowing down the movement. And it was quite fascinating to me. And also, it's just very different than using a mace, even though you can also use it similarly to a mace. Then in other parts of the country, it's called a Mudgar or a mugdar, which is more generic for club, right? It doesn't really matter what shape it has. The name is kind of the same. Now, this is also sometimes called a Gada.
And you're calling it, it's called Gada here?
Huh? Gada.
It's called Gada here?
Gada.
So not Mugdar.
Mugdar. No, it's called as Hanuman Gada. Hanuman.
Then there's also the actual short Gada, which is the Gada that is used as a weapon, also not the longer ones. And they're also functioning in a similar way as a club. So you can do similar movement patterns with a shorter version of the Gada. I've seen that in Karlakattai, one of the martial arts in the southern part of India. In Kushti wrestling, you still find the Mudgars and the clubs. And the wrestlers actually still use them, and there's always some old and ancient wooden clubs in the background, and some people know how to use them and some don't. But it's interesting how that's still part of the culture, right? The idea of actually training your grip strength, your shoulder strength, your arm strength, because you have to use that when you're wrestling, and it's very important. What happened, and this is an interesting turnaround, Scott Sonnen, who's done massive work in the club world, he launched his first program in 2003, and he called it the Clubbell. He interpreted the wooden clubs as a metal version, and that changed the way that we actually swing with these tools. He used a lot of the kettlebell movements, the hip hinges, the static holds, the presses, the legs, adding those to that, and more into a tactical form of training. Called that company TagFit or Circular Strength Training, I think, in the beginning. And yeah, that was pretty massive because these clubs were made of metal, and it was very different You know, it's a similar size, it's sometimes a similar weight, but the thing is, a clubbell can actually go much heavier, and this is also one of the benefits or the key distinctions of why you would use a club, a heavy club, is because you can go up to 20, 30 kilos, and you can actually properly swing that in between the legs, which is a great benefit for the hips, the legs, etc., and adds a very different dynamic and perspective to swinging a club. Because if you want to make a 20 kilo club of wood, you can imagine, and this one is 6, so that will be about this size and this big, and you know, you can only do one thing, swing it behind the back. So actually creating that from steel has changed the game for a heavy club quite a bit. So that's also important to note with history and how, you know, heavy club training came about. Now, a brief intersection here. I also have online courses for training with a heavy club, a 101 and a 6, which will take you through basically a beginner level to single arm swings, pivots, everything. So it's quite advanced, and this will get you from A to Z for the heavy club, whether you have a Mudgar, Clubbell, Bulava, or anything else. So the first thing that we need to realize is that swinging with a club in different ways, different formats, is actually a very natural way of moving the shoulder. A lot of times when we train for our shoulders, it's very static, very geared towards the deltoids out the front, separating them, isolating them, side and back, and making sure that we actually train it like that and train it like this. And well, that's not really what the shoulder is made for. It's the most mobile joint that we have. We can move it in 3D everywhere, like in front, behind. So then we have the other thing, is that it's the joint that is least connected to the body. So it's almost only stabilized by muscles. The joint of the shoulder is very small. So this creates a very unique situation where if you want to have a healthy shoulder, you want to have all of those muscles binding your humerus to your shoulders. And working with a club is really, really powerful in strengthening the entire chain that creates movement from the shoulder and from the arm. So using a club in that way, as it's very dynamic in its movements, is a great way to train the shoulder in its natural capacity of range of motion, which would also be one of the benefits adding into mobility. Because what would we say, mobility is kind of a flexibility but have strength. Well, the idea is that we're reaching into areas where we normally wouldn't be, and we're reaching there with weight. So the moment weight pulls on structure, it opens up, right? So with repetition, this does have an effect on the mobility of areas that are connected to the shoulders, and the lats are very important, the back size and the chest is also very important. So using that with a club will create an increase of mobility in areas where you probably don't have much mobility, because in sedentary life we're sitting forward postures, we're rounding our upper back, our shoulders are tilted forward. You hear a lot of people that actually train in the gym, they have issues with their shoulder impingements when they bench press. Now, training with a club, or training with clubs in general, can help resolve that. Then I'd like to talk about some of the muscular benefits of using a club. There's quite a lot, and at the same time it's also not a bodybuilding tool, because it's a hybrid exercise, or it's a hybrid tool. You always do compound movements with it. You can use it statically, for example pressing up, but then still you're using many more muscles than if you would use a machine which holds your arm in place and your body in place. So there's never really one muscle that's working here. So if you're doing it for a particular training of a specific muscle, you probably should just go to the gym and do that, and do this to help make sure that your shoulder is functional and actually strong in all positions. First of all, grip strength, massive thing. You're always holding onto something, and this is supposed to be one of the best ways to train your grip strength, to actually hold something and make sure that it doesn't slip out of your hand. Well, you do that all the time. It is measured that if you actually drop a weight, it triples in weight as you go down. So this club is 6 kilos, which means the actual force that goes down would be then 18 kilos in its lowest point, which means that the force on your grip strength is actually quite taxing. So holding on to a club, especially in the beginning, is very taxing, and as you get better, you learn how to use your grip more efficiently. But still, fingers, hands, wrists, forearms, they all work very much. Then the tricep works a lot, especially when you're doing back swings. It's always bending and pulling over. So a club movement is basically simulating a static pullover, right? But then with the twist and with the use of the rotator cuff. So using the tricep to pull down and then extend the arm almost will activate that nice little tricep over there. Then we have the bicep. You're always holding it. You're always coming back to that 90-degree angle, so the bicep works in that way, but it also works with front swings when you swing it in front and you pull it back. So it's a great way to basically train the entire arm. Then we go on to the shoulder. The deltoids are of course working. You're pressing up, you're pulling down, side goes up, front goes up, pulling backwards, always stabilizing. So the deltoids are definitely working, although there's also a part where the momentum actually moves and you use other parts of your body, the core, the hips, which doesn't necessarily help train the shoulders. But there is a definite activation of the internal and external rotation of the shoulder, the abduction, the adduction, and those are very important, especially when we talk about the rotator cuff, the infraspinatus, and all the muscles behind here. They work hard to stabilize the shoulder, and you actually will train those. You will stretch them, you will pull them back, and it's a very dynamic movement, especially when you use a heavy club, because you can actually do static movements in comparison to, for example, a Gada or a mace, where it's much more flowy. The mace, you have to use momentum a lot more, and because this is relatively smaller, you can do a lot more exercises like this, where the shoulder actually has to use a lot of strength to balance the weight out, and this might look easy, but it's actually not. And in types of training like Karlakattai, he once showed me an exercise where you have to push it out like this, backwards and in, and you can really feel the immense amount of strength that is required, and also the weird positions you can get into with just a weight, which is not something that we do usually when swinging or when training basically with regular weights. Then the lat muscle, it does work because you pull down, right? This is where the actual lat pulls in and it controls it. And well, it's up to you how much you use it, because you can still lean forward and kind of have everything loaded on the interior chain. So you always want to pull back. So again, with a lot of these things, the technique is really important. Understanding how a movement works will also make sure that you either use muscles or train or gain in size or not. Now then we can talk about the core, which is of course always working, because especially with a heavy club, there's always weight on one side and not on the other. So the core has to work in this position already, it's working. But when you're swinging, also there's a point where the momentum actually starts to work. The core on all sides, back and in front, around the body, needs to work and stabilize. Very important. Now, for the heavy club, you actually can use a lot of hinge movements. So the glutes, the hamstrings can do a lot of work. You can use lunges, you can use squats, so you can use your legs, you can train them, you can actually load them up to quite an extensive amount of weight. So that's also very, it depends what you want to use it for, guys, because you can go all the way with this tool. So those were the most important muscle groups that you're working with a heavy club. Then let's talk about skill development or brain improvement. Very, very important with any swinging tool is the amount of possibility in exercises that you're doing is so big. So this means that you have a chance to increase your skill almost infinitely, as you would be able to know when you go through one of our courses at Dutch Flow Academy. You can go very far with skill development, and this is very healthy for the brain. It's usually referred to as plasticity, but the idea that we're working on a new skill creates new neural pathways in our brain, which is very healthy and keeps our brain young, which is very important when we're doing anything. Exercise can in that way really benefit your brain. Welcome to the Netherlands, and then all of a sudden it's raining. Who would have expected that? Well, I would have, because I'm from the Netherlands. So next up in the brain section, there's motor planning, where you actually can imagine something in the future. And you do this a lot with training with a club because there's so much complexity, and the moment you start to create flows, combination of movements, I always say that you have to think 2 steps ahead, so you kind of already know what you're going to do, and this is really healthy for the brain. There's motor coordination, which involves the actual use of your musculature and the connection with the brain in that sense. And one of the important things here is also the use of the non-dominant hand. So in the way that club training is taught is that you always do something with left and right. So if you can do this on the right, that's great. But you also have to do that on the left, which means that you use your non-dominant hand, the one that's usually less capable of catching up, and you have to train that hand. And this is shown in research to have many benefits, like almost too many, like just weird stuff. But the main thing is that it works on your ability to feel, your creativity, and your level of intuition, which are very important parts of actually developing your flow. But it's very fascinating that to work on both sides actually helps increase and improve that. Then there's spatial awareness. I hope you guys are still with me. Spatial awareness is how you can feel and interact with the space around you. So knowing where your body is in space, so to speak. Now with the amount of pivots that you're doing, where you're aiming the club towards somewhere, where you're actually using vision, where you have to go, you always have to be aware of where you're at in space. And this is great to have a skill as a human, so it helps improve that. So then we also have proprioception, your body's ability to actually sense movement, action and location. Now part of that is balance, because you always have it on one side and you're swinging towards one side. Your body has to adapt and to basically be grounded. So that's what you're training a lot here, how to stand strong. And this is also where some of the history of wrestling comes from, where you actually have to stand your ground, so to speak. You have to stay rooted into the ground and your feet have to work. And this is great for balancing exercises. You can of course also do things on one leg. There's different types to actually work on this, but it does improve that. Now then we can talk a little bit about martial arts, or the idea that you actually have to let go. So how you actually have to use a tool. So you're not just training your musculature or your brain, you're actually also improving your ability to hold something and to guide something towards something. So I noticed, for example, that since I swung maces and clubs, my ability to chop wood without doing that has increased quite a bit. And so my ability to swing swords, my ability to do anything that's related to shoulder and swinging movements has improved, and that's an amazing benefit that most people are not aware of. And the fact that you can now do it with left and right, which is usually not taught in these traditional arts, is very special and not to be underestimated in that sense. The fact that you actually have to let go and make use of that is also connected to martial arts, because you have to make use of the tool to make sure that it becomes an extension of the arm, right? So you're creating that extra effect because of the length, and in that sense when you drop it, there's this sense of having to let go. And this is also part of martial arts. It's not part of usual strength training, and this is what you can learn when swinging clubs and maces. And it also has a massive effect on your body. So I mentioned before that it triples in weight as you drop it, which means that the entire weight is now on the arm, which makes sure that it stretches out the joints and the ligaments and makes sure that synovial fluid is actually able to pass through it and lubricate every part of your arm and your shoulder, which is a great benefit not often talked about. And then I want to finish, as I'm swinging this club, with the last benefit, and that it's actually fun. Now I talked about this before with the mace, but the amount of possibilities that you have with a club, where you can go, how you can do things on either side, how you can be creative with so many different types of pivots and lunges and different ways of connecting movements together, creating different transitions. It's endless. So the fact that you can do it outside, in the sun, in the rain, it's just spectacular. So I'm in love with this tool. I hope I inspired you a little bit to start picking it up, because that's usually what the first step is, right? I can talk about this for another hour, but eventually it's up to you. Are you going to buy the tool or not? And I hope that this video helped you maybe make that extra effort to actually start putting some money and investment in this, because you're not doing it just for the tool, you're also doing it for yourself. And I hope that's clear now. So I mentioned this before, if you want to learn how to actually use this tool and buy it, we have courses on dutchflowacademy.com for the heavy club specifically. We have it for all the categories of swinging tools. But yeah, you can train and you can go a long way. These courses are 6 weeks, but some people take a year to actually go through this and actually perfect this. So there's a long way for you to increase in skill and capability, and it really works if you have a system around it that leads you from A to Z, instead of you having to watch single exercises and kind of piece it together yourself. I've done it already for you, and it's ready to be viewed. So if you're interested in that, please visit dutchflowacademy.com. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I enjoyed making this, even in the rain. I usually look out for the sun when creating videos or when I want to be outside, but being outside is good, being barefoot is good, being in the heath in the Netherlands is great. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Boom! Heavy Club 6 is live. Training with a heavy club, also known as a Mudgar or Clubbell, is one of the best ways to train your shoulder strength and stability in all ranges of motion. Each week has 3 workouts and will introduce new exercises. As you progress through the weeks, you'll move from 2-handed exercises to 1-handed exercises. You'll learn to train with a unique tempo system, which will redefine your way of training with a heavy club. Are you ready to level up with your heavy club training? Join now on dutchflowacademy.com. Thank you for your attention. It's greatly appreciated. If you like the content, please consider to share, like, and subscribe to my channel. If you want to see similar videos, you can see them over here. If you're interested in learning more from me as a coach, I've got online courses on dutchflowacademy.com. Keep flowing, Ram Ram.